Que lo que mi gente, welcome to the Monoplaza F1 podcast. As always, I'm your host, Emi Bertre, and with me today is a very special and very illustrious guest. Today on the pod, we have my brother, Elkyn.
Yes, sir.
Welcome to the podcast. How you doing, man?
Good, man. Thanks for having me on. Uh, had me doing my homework beforehand, watching a lot of the race. Even got my wife Whitney to check out the race with me, and she was all in, all in.
Oh man, I respect that dedication to the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's get into it. It was a wild weekend, a torrential weekend, rain all over the place, blah blah blah, this, that, and the third. So quickly, or real quick, or take as much time as my podcast. I can do whatever you want. What was your impression of the São Paulo Grand Prix?
Honestly, I'll tell you this. Outside of the red flag and whatnot, the shenanigans, it felt like you know how some races you're like, you know what? I think this race I could take a nap, sit back, take a nap, and I'm good. Nothing will happen. Honestly, felt like this one you had to keep seeing what happened because there was
Facts,
just
yeah.
like you would just see them zoom over to someone on the grass, zoom over to someone, take a wide angle, someone sliding, and then they're like, when are they going to restart? And then everyone has all sorts of infractions left and right, and you're like, oh, we're going to
Mm-hmm.
get someone disqualified. What's going on? I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it all the way through. Like I was just watching it, and as I mentioned, Whitney was watching it too, and she's like, "Who should I watch for?" And I was like, "Well, let's think about this. The drivers' championship." I told her I was like, one and two is Max Verstappen's one, Lando Norris two. I was like, you got to watch these guys for sure because Max is starting all the way down in 17th. And then I would just hear because I was actually prepping some stuff cleaning. I would just hear her yell out, "Max moved up again." Max moved up again. Max moved up again, and that was her. So we were just cracking up, and she was like, eventually it clicked for her. She was like, "Oh, Max Verstappen," and she was like, "Duh, duh, duh, duh," and I was like, "Yeah, that's Max." And eventually, like she went ahead and took a nap, and I watched the rest of the race, and I think it's one of those races that eventually the top three were set. I think we all kind of knew that top three towards the end was set, but I think for me, I'm gonna say I'm not a Max Verstappen fan,
Sure,
but it
sure.
was kind of cool seeing him just like I don't know, kind of seeing like Lando had kind of been getting spicy with him. And Lando, been getting real, like, saying it with his chest. He has some words to say.
Mm-hmm.
And Max
Mm-hmm.
was like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, everyone, I got a little something for y'all. And it was just like, you see that purple, purple, purple. And the
Yeah, it
words,
really was. Yeah, just
and
fast lap after fast lap. Yeah,
it
yeah.
was in the words of the great philosophers, 3-6 Mafia with the purple, purple, purple. And that's, that's what it was after that. But yeah, overall, man, it was outside of the rain. Like, I know the rain took away some of like, the faster driving could have seen. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it.
I, I actually don't. I mean, I don't think you're saying this either. I actually thought it was great that it was raining. Like so I watched the forecast and everything, so I knew it was gonna rain. I didn't realize it was gonna rain like that much, especially like yesterday with qualifying not happening and then waking up early. Um, and obviously, like it was really weird for me. Just like a random side note, I didn't realize it was daylight savings time.
Mm.
Right? And so, like, if you're in the United States, right, daylight savings times ended. Was it today at 2 a.m. or something like that? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that kind of like threw me off because I'm looking at the schedule. I'm like, oh, okay, so uh, qualifying's off until Sunday morning, and it's gonna be at 4:30. No, 5:30. And so I just like woke up at 4:30, and yeah, like, I don't honestly remember. It was like it was all a blur. All right, so I'm gonna take it bit by bit now. I agree. The race was definitely a very exciting one, if not for just the chaos, right? So like you start from the beginning, they do the formation lap, and then on the freaking formation lap, the Incredible Sulk, aka Lawrence Stroll's baby boy, Lance is into the wall. Not bad enough for the car to be messed up. And I don't know if you saw the onboard for Lance after. So the crash happened for Lance, and he asked his engineer, "Hey, can I just like reverse out of it?" And they're like, "Yes, you can reverse out, but you're gonna have to come to the pits to get a new front wing." Completely, totally savable race. And I swear to God, all Lance does is like, "Yeah, I'm good." just drives the car into the gravel, and I'm just like, my guy, what are you doing? He's like, I'm all right, man. What he's like, all right, man, I'm out.
It's just
And it's like,
it's like his inner conscious was like, I'm gonna need you to log off now. Like that Lisa Simpson thing. His conscience was just
he
like, hey man,
was was that like a rage quit? You know, like whenever you're playing like video, he just he's like, nah, I'm out. Right, and I kind of felt that like, so I'm gonna go back like at the beginning of the weekend. Lance was in, so I'd seen Lance, and I think I tweeted out about it. Like he was in a press conference. It was him, Lewis Hamilton, and
oh,
Franco Colapinto,
yep,
and Lance was just like on some real. If Marshawn Lynch wasn't cool and was there, so he won't get fined, that was like Lance's whole attitude, right? Like they asked Lance a question, like, "Hey, Lance, what car would you want to drive if you had any?" And he's like, I don't know, any car from that era. Surely any car would be better than the cars we're driving now. And I was like,
oh
this guy doesn't want to be here. And I just want to be like, Lance, Eduardo, I don't know what his middle name is. It's okay, boy. Just quit. You're good.
man,
Your daddy's a billionaire. Go play tennis. It's anyways. And so like for me, so it was weird, right? Like you fast forward to the race, and obviously like he goes off on a formation lap, which oddly enough that happened last year with Charles Leclerc, but it was a little bit different situation, right? The emergency systems for Charles Leclerc car last year went off, and that's what caused him to crash on the formation lap. But with Lance, he could have gone back to the pits. He could have gotten new
yeah.
wings, but he literally, I just felt like he was just like, all right, man, I'm out. straight straight to the pits. And so that led into a little bit of confusion. I'll be honest, I was a little bit confused. So they did an aborted lap, which was
Yeah.
fine, right? They come back around, and obviously we would find out later like they'll just get a fine from it, but then Lando starts the new formation lap before the lights are actually green to do the formation lap, right? So they had to do like the aborted lap again, right before like the race. So like the race for me was already like how it started, right? Like how it started was just like very weird for me.
I think you knew like after that, everything that happened, you're like, this is about to be a weird, like just a funky race. I think
100%.
everything like was just like, and like my son was watching it, and first of all, he kind of just looked at because he saw the other cars kind of driving, and he's like, Papi, why did that one just decide to park in the gravel? And I was like, oh, like, oh, we you must learn the ways of Stroll. It's mysterious, but it works. But no, you can kind of tell. Like, I mean, I haven't been watching F1 like consistently as you. I'll say this. Like
Sure.
my first foray into F1 was my good friend Andrew Thompson back from college. He started talking about like when Lewis Hamilton got on the scene. He started talking about it was him, and
Mm-hmm.
then Jonathan Arregio were like the two who were like constantly talking about Lewis, and then I just had it like implanted in my brain. So like now seeing this, I kind of seen like gone through like 2 seasons with like a season, almost 2 seasons with you and I discussing it, and I just knew I was like, this is gonna be a weird, just not
Real
your
funky race.
typical type of
Yep.
race, and it wasn't. I think that's. I mean, it just wasn't at all.
So obviously it was weird, right? Leading up to the race, you had Lando doing a lot of yapping, right? So much so that I feel like he got Max kind of out of his shell, right? Where I don't know if you saw the interview where Max was essentially saying like, Lando saying I'm always going to drive how I'm going to drive, and that's not going to change. But I got 3 championships, so I
I
was
saw
like,
that.
oh, clap back. He
Yeah.
said he was making that chopper sing. He was like, everybody can get it. And so for
Yeah.
me, it was weird. We knew he was going to take a grid penalty, 5 place grid penalty, because he was um, taking in a new power unit. Shouts out Honda for that, right? Which I think they've got like 1 year after this with Honda, and then I think they're moving to Ford powertrain, and I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure they maybe it'll work out for Red Bull. I don't know. But so a lot was said, right? And then, like, obviously during the sprint race, um, Lando ended up winning thanks to team orders, blah, 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 blah. But a lot was said, right? When you
Yeah.
get to qualifying, you start having a lot of people start arguing about British bias, the FIA's rig, which I thought was a little rich coming from the Red Bull camp about the FIA. Like, nah, man, this is manipulated. I was like,
I mean, I'm not gonna say anything, but I think the FIA has held Red Bull's hand a little bit. I mean, they have guided them through troubled waters, as I say. They have.
basically. And so, like, For me, I was like, okay, specifically, Max was already going to start wherever he qualified. He was going to be five below, and I don't know if you know this or not. He's actually really good in the rain. Um, I'm not going to say shouts out Jos Verstappen for that because I'm like, I don't know. It's kind of borderline having your kid out there in the cold, but whatever. Iron sharpens iron. If that's your parenting style, do you? But what did kind of get Max in a little bit of hot water was the end of SQ2 and the red flag that came on and how that came like
Mm,
really really late, right? Like the timing was a little
yeah,
suspicious in terms of like we're going to let, I say this like I know them, it to their camp it felt like the FIA let Lando complete his lap and then red flag the session with not
yeah.
enough with not
I
enough.
was like,
So like yeah, what'd you feel about that? Was that kind of
I
suspicious?
was like, ooh, I was like, I was like, that ain't right. That's suspicious. I was like, ooh, I was like, FI, you have some explaining to do right now. Like this whole like, I think like you probably know this. They're and we're and I know we're probably gonna like talk about it more, but I'm just like the red flags just felt inconsistent from the
Hmm. Hmm.
qualifying to the sprints. Even I mean, it seemed like at the race they finally got it, but like especially with the qualified and sprints and and then the qualifying again before the race, it just kind of felt like they didn't know. I was just like, this is real inconsistent.
So that's one of my biggest gripes actually with F1. And I think I've actually talked to you about this in the past. Any other sport in the United States and even in Europe, you have a team of officials. It's not a volunteer position, it's a team of officials. There's an organization for it, and they go from match to match, game to game, whatever it is. And for me, the thing that has always been baffling for a sport at this caliber as professional, that a steward's position is a volunteer position and they're on rotation. So the inconsistency, right? You have like your race director, right, which is different obviously than your stewards, but to me it's past time that Formula 1, FIA get together and say, "Hey, these are our officials, these are our stewards, and we're going to put them on a rotation throughout the calendar year," right? Rather than like you said, the inconsistency, which is very apparent now, very apparent in times past, right? Of like, well, so this was a penalty last race. It's not a penalty now. This was 5 seconds this race. 2 races from now, it's going to be 10 seconds. This is not a penalty, or it is a penalty, but we're going to give you a fine. Like, it's just kind of like,
No, what it's like, it almost feels like some days it's like, whose line is it anyway? Where they make up the rules on the go and like the points are arbitrary, no one knows what's going on. But like I think even like George Russell brought up a super good point. Like, why haven't we gone to the point where it's a paid position where these people are trained constantly? And like even places that have umpires or refs, you have like your separate teams. You don't have to hire like the same team for every single race. You have your own teams, but what happened? At least there's some type. I feel like there's not much like, okay, this all went wrong. How can we have like a unified front and how we make decisions? Because like some sports, their officiating is horrible, but you know what? It's a unified how they officiate. It's all unified. Like, and that's the thing. At least the fans know what to expect. They're like, hey, these officials are going to do it like this. I think that's what's frustrating. And you and I have talked about it various
mm-hmm.
times. Like, we're just like, we don't know what they're going to say after like reviewing something. And they're like, the stewards have taken note of this. And I'm like, yeah. And what's going to happen? Nothing. And I think
Nothing.
and that's frustrating. I think especially like if you have fans who are trying to get into F1 more and trying to
Mm-hmm.
understand some of these rules and how they get enforced, I think there'll be a turnoff for a lot of people, especially those who come from a lot of those team sports.
Yeah. And so the inconsistent, again, the timing of that red flag. So going back to that point, the timing of the red flag during that qualifying session was really suspicious. Knocked out Max and Checo, and then obviously because of the grid penalty, so Max finished. He qualified 12th. Checo behind him at 13, and then Max takes a 5 place grid spot, as everybody knew was going to happen. So I guess
Hmm.
starting at P17, did you think, right? And it's a good segue into the next thing. Like, did you think that his race weekend was over at that point?
Honestly, didn't like in my head. I'm like P17. I was like, he's gonna end up with points. That's how I viewed it. Like, I like he is absolutely gonna get points. I looked at the drivers all stacked in front of him. I looked at the way that their cars have been performing in the last few weeks, And I was just like, based on his skill, and I believe 100% the generational driver, I was like,
Hmm.
in my head, I was like, he's going to get probably like at least seventh or sixth. That's where I looked at.
I honestly, I felt the same way. So like this week and last week, I've been kind of deceived by McLaren, mostly because like obviously, Lando started P1 and George was behind him at P2. I have spoken at length about, like, for example, like Lando's starts are really terrible. Like, you know that, I know that, we've talked
Yeah.
about that. So like when George passed him, I was not surprised, right? But the fact that it took Lando that long to get past George in a W15 that, at least for one of their drivers, is not like very good. So for me, Lando was like wasting a lot of time, right? So I didn't think, honestly, didn't think Max was going to win the race, but I didn't think that Lando would perform as bad, that McLaren would perform as bad. And obviously, like later on in the race, you know that um, both George and Lando pitted too soon, and an untimely flag finally worked in Verstappen's favor, right? And then
Hmm.
he was basically behind an Alpine, which, yeah, okay, Alpine, I'm out. So I guess, like, what do you make of Max's drive as he was just kind of like slicing through the field? I think that for me, the most shocking overtake was, did you get a chance to see when he passed Piastri?
Yeah. I was just
Just
like,
like,
it was nothing. Like,
thanks. Yeah,
it was,
thanks.
yeah, I was just like, okay. I was like, Piastri, I mean, what is going on? And like, I think for me too, kind of just watching it, it wasn't like, because like Max has got him. It's been a whole thing about, is he being too aggressive, changing his driving style, but he didn't have to be
Mm-hmm.
aggressive. I think, I mean, you talked about his comfort with rain. Like, I would say, like, right now, like, the only other person who, if you put him in a good, decent car, who could probably, who would have been up there a few seconds with him, probably would have been Lewis. Like,
Yeah,
if you would have lose that, but Max kind of said, like, I'm gonna just slither my way through, and he kept going there. And I watched the beginning of that race, watching Lando behind Russell, and I could see, like, it wasn't like Lando never got like more than a second behind Russell. He was just there, and I was like waiting. I was like, Lando, you have the better car, man. Like, get to it. And then it was like contrast that with Max, where Max was like, I know I'm better. Like, it's almost like Max knows like he's better. And I think that makes a big difference when it comes to like winning these races and winning the drivers championship, is, like, wholeheartedly believe you're like, I'm the best driver
oh
here
yeah,
on this grid.
yeah,
Like, if if you talk to those guys, honestly, if you ask some of them, they'll tell you, ah, you know what, I maybe rank myself below this guy, below this guy. But like, Max was just doing that, and just seeing him pass. And I know I know there's no way you could have predicted that stoppage, red flag.
sure,
But
sure.
like, I think what rubbed me the wrong way, because of how good Max did, I felt like him getting all those fastest lap was afterwards, when Lando was just like, said that phrase, pure luck. When he busted that out, I'm like, yes, it's luck to one point, to have that red flag come out when it did, but I don't think it's luck that Max kept increasing his lead over and over again. Like, that's the thing. If it would have been luck, then those Alpine boys, I think, would have just caught up with Max, caught up with Red Bull, and it would have been
Sure.
fine. But
I
uh, go ahead.
I guess no. What I was gonna say is, like, I guess I wasn't expecting the pace of the Red Bull. So like I think that for Max, you're right. It is the confidence that he has driving in the rain. You mentioned Lewis; he has that confidence too. Obviously, I'd also throw in Alonso in there
Hmm.
as well, and a little bit more of like the seasoned drivers. I was I was a little bit shocked, for example, like when he passed Oscar. So when Max passed Oscar, I was like, oh yeah, he, unless something catastrophic happens, he's on his way. He's just like, because I don't think Oscar was not like, Oscar knew Max was behind him, but just like when where Max chose his breaking point was so unexpected to Oscar that it was like, I
You
think at
could,
that point Oscar was like,
it caught him so off. He's like, hey
well,
man,
yeah,
yeah,
because again, you think about the fact that they're driving like what, 70, 80, 90,
hmm
100, 110 miles an hour down some straights, and then you got to make a turn. At some point you want to hit the brakes, but because you drive, I drive, we don't
yeah,
drive that fast in the rain. If you hit those brakes, you're flying.
yeah,
The race had just been people flying, right? I don't even know if at that point Colapinto had gone out, if Behrman had gone out. There'd been so many like yellow flags in
Yeah.
sector 3 specifically, right? Um, and so I guess I was not, again, I was surprised by the pace. I didn't think that he would win the race. I thought, like you, that he would be in the point. But as I'm watching the race, I'm realizing that some drivers recognize, like, okay, that car is there. It's not my battle, right? So you
Yeah.
saw when Max was going against Lewis, Lewis didn't really put up much of a defense. Obviously, Lewis had been struggling with the car all weekend. He was like, yeah, man, not my race.
Yeah.
Go ahead, big dog, right? And the same thing. Obviously, the two Visa Cash App 2-for-1 cars that were ahead, they were definitely, yeah, that's just,
I kind of felt,
that's,
hey, those two guys, I kind of felt like they just like showed him the red carpet. I was just like, these guys.
come on, big
Yeah.
dog. What? Come on.
I knew that.
Hey,
I knew that was gonna happen. Like I saw, I was like, oh yeah, these guys.
that's exactly the beef that everybody has, right? You know that, right? It's like, what is the point of having another team if they're
Yeah.
just gonna take like team orders from the big boss, right? Like, hey, I'm gonna go ahead and need Lawson and Yuki to get out of the way. Yes,
Yeah.
sir. Right away. So it was like, gracias. And so, uh, yeah, at that point, obviously Max had the grip, Max had all of that. And I will say to in Lando's defense, right? Um, yes, he sounds salty. Lando has the propensity to do that at times because whatever he's in his feelings, his emo, whatever it is. Um, in his defense, maybe what he was alluding to was essentially like he just got lucky with that red flag,
Oh,
right?
definitely. Yeah.
I'm assuming that he wasn't taking shots, saying like I would have won regardless, because I think how Max was driving, they either would have crashed or Lando would have gotten past, right? But I think in Lando's defense, which is crazy, he most likely was just alluding to the fact that like, hey, that safety car or the red flag of the race is really what helped y'all. And so I guess specifically speaking on Lando, or actually before I move there, with Max, I think he, besides him having to win this for his fourth title that
Hmm.
most likely he's going to win in Vegas, right? This race felt like a real cathartic, like, release for Max,
Oh
right? Like, I
yeah.
don't think I've ever. It's been a while since I've seen him that excited, or that emotional in his way of being emotional for a race win. Because right, he hadn't won since
It's been 10
Spain.
races, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah, somebody on my Twitter timeline said, mind you, this is the last race that Max Verstappen is winning this season, and they said that 10 races ago. So I was like, dang, witchcraft
Yeah,
straight.
I know.
Uh,
But you're right though. Like kind of when you cross the finish line, they have that camera angle of the driver, like the onboard, and you can kind of just see him just like it's
mhm.
almost like a deep sigh of relief because he was. It was almost like he was like, "Am I going to get back here?" Because the that Red Bull car had just not been doing well.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
McLaren and I would say Ferrari, they had like done well. Even I mean, Mercedes had probably like it was almost like a four race like point of the calendar when they were like up there for a little bit, and they kind of felt like Red Bull wasn't improving. Oh, we'll get to Mercedes. Oh, we'll get there. Don't
oh
worry.
yeah, I'm gonna
But
blaze them.
it was just one of those things where like as much as for me like I looked at him and like in my head I was like this is one of the best drives I've seen. Like for an individual driver,
Absolutely,
it is one of the best
absolutely,
drives I had ever seen. Like I've gone
absolutely.
back, watched some highlights. I think you got to tip your hat and like people like to like bring up like Lewis's going back to was it 21 in Brazil when
Yep,
Lewis was
21 in Brazil.
but I think for me, what makes it so impressive, like I know Lewis was further back, but like, and I know Max had the fortune of that red flag, but just doing it on rain, I think that for me really matters. But at the same time, I'm just like he had an incredible drive, and I tip my hat to him. I don't think there's much else you can say to that. But go ahead, you want to say something?
No, 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 that's it. Like I again, I am not a Max Verstappen apologist or a stan, right? It is what it is. But like to not recognize what a sensational drive that was, like
Yeah,
now you're just being a hater to be a hater, right? Like this is not me saying like I think he's better than Lewis, I think he's better than, but no, but like yeah, recognize it. Like to me, and this may be my bias, so whatever, it's my podcast. Again, I can say whatever I want. The drive in 21 from Lewis to me is still a better drive because he did that
Yeah.
on merit, right?
Hmm.
Whereas obviously Max was aided by some really timely yellow flags, red flags, and the fact that he had the two Alpines behind him. They were
Yeah.
not catching him. I just saw him open up that gap to Esteban Ocon, and it was like 3 seconds, 6 seconds, 8 seconds, 13. I was
Yeah.
like, yeah, he gone. They're not catching him.
And it was
100% they're not catching
it
him.
was almost like they were blocking anyone else from. But even
Yeah,
then, like
maybe.
you looked at the way the other car, I'm like, there's no way like Russell, even if Russell got him past those two, I'm like, he wouldn't have caught
No,
up. He would
no.
not have caught up.
He probably would have done something crazy. If so, for me, if Russell had gotten past Gasly and somehow gotten past like Ocon,
Hmm.
he would have done something breezy to try to get to Max, and he would have ended up like in the wall somewhere or crashing with somebody somewhere. Like,
But yeah, I don't know.
yeah,
Like, I think like you were almost like I almost want to switch gears, like going over to Lando. I think he almost talked about his weekend. I think this weekend, even
mm.
him winning the sprint didn't make him like look good. I don't know, like I think
Oh yeah,
because everyone's
yeah,
like, yeah, Oscar team orders, and then like I think just for me was I messaged you about this, the timing of when it happened, the virtual
yep,
safety car, when to deploy that, and I was like, oh
yep.
my goodness, all that stuff watching him. But then it's just like you go from there to the Grand Prix, and even the race though, there was a good angle of the race where you kind of see Max get first as one of the on the restart, and you just see Lando going wide. That's the clip that for me is going to stick out from that race because it felt like there was multiple times I would hear the commentator say, "And Lando's gone wide," and I could almost tell like I don't know, maybe you have a lot better sense in this than me at this because you've been watching these races more intently. You pay more attention to stuff. Like I felt like Lando was a little bit more nervous than I had seen him before. Like Lando to me, I've also like crapped on him before, but you don't get up to that spot, be number two in the standings, being a horrible driver. You have to have some skill.
Obviously.
But I feel like though this race is probably the most nervous I've seen him. I don't know. What do you feel?
I mean, okay, so yes, let's switch gears.
Yeah,
His weekend obviously could have been a lot better,
yeah.
right? This was a golden opportunity for him to put some points on
Hmm.
Max, all of that. The argument against Lando obviously has been that he has just not stepped up, not lived up to the moment, and I think he has not won from the fan perspective a lot of grace from any of the fans based on comments he's made in the past, specifically obviously to Lewis Hamilton. More recently, comments that he's made about Max Verstappen, about like, yeah, he's this, that, true or not, whatever, right? It's been crazy to see that now that Lando has a car that's better and it's a winning car, he's not taking advantage of that moment. Obviously, for me and Lando, I thought his championship was over in Hungary, to be completely honest with
Mm,
you. Because at that point, like in Hungary, it was team orders and the teams telling him, hey, Lando, you're going to need the team later on to help you win. Like for me, if I had been Lando in Hungary, I would have given Oscar the position.
yeah.
The team would have said, you guys can race, you're free to race. Then I would have just passed Oscar.
That's all he had to do. But
Full stop.
he waited. He played that game where he's like,
34 laps.
"Yep." He played that game and he played himself. That's what happens. It's
100%. And
that.
so for me,
Go ahead.
no, it was over for me. It was over at that point. It was over. I was like, okay. And the fact that McLaren was like, okay, we'll have another opportunity. We got to let Oscar get. And I'm just kind of like, okay.
Uh,
And so obviously, like the argument against Lando has always been that he can't live up to the moment. He doesn't have the guts or the killer instinct that it takes. I think more than anything, if this is Lando's one and only opportunity to actually go and get a championship, obviously that's going to be sad for him if it's not. So if McLaren comes back and that car is strong next year, I think he will have learned a lot from this year and the opportunities. Now, I will say, not even a criticism, it's just being realistic. Trying to drive that fast in a recently paved track in that much rain is not for the faint of heart,
yeah.
right? Because it switched from heavy downpour to light rain, but it was never like a fully dry track, right? On top of, you keep seeing people just like sliding off, sliding off, because like Interlagos is up, down, curves, right? It's a lot of stuff. You got like the Senna S, right, which is
Mm-hmm.
like a tight turn. And so for me, like, it's not that I was disappointed. I think I just expected him to take advantage of the opportunity. His race was obviously toast when he had some wheel spin and George got ahead of him, and then he wasn't able to pass George,
Yeah.
right? He could have capitalized in Mexico yesterday. Obviously, he was able to finish on the podium and get P2, but like he wasted too much time. Like so you're right. It's like it's this like he's got to take that extra step, but like he doesn't. And I will say that like at least in Latin America, the nickname that Lando has gotten is Blando,
Oh
right?
wow.
Yeah, and so for those who don't know, for those who don't know and speak and don't speak Spanish, blando means soft. All right, specific like mushy.
Man.
So yeah, they call him Lando Norris. And I'm just like, dang. So yeah, I guess my question without fail is Lando's championship officially over? Are we looking at a coronation in Vegas for Verstappen?
I think we are. I think for me, like, here's when that race started, when we talked about today's race. For me, I'm just like, Lando, the guy who you're chasing is the 17th place. If you're going to make a move, this has to be now. If you give anyone a previous year, we can talk about champions who won recently, we can go back decades.
Mm-hmm.
Your rival is starting that late or starting that far back on the grid, they immediately know I have to put my foot down. Like this is when you put your foot down. There's weakness,
Yep.
and you have to go for it. And it kind of felt like
Yep.
it was like a whimper. And I think that was a thing. Like no, because it was like at one point it was like you have like a cat meowing compared to a lion roaring, and that's what it felt like when you compared.
Not the cat's meow.
I
Damn.
know, but that's how it felt like. It was almost like a whimper. And when you had like I think even Max even gave a shout out to Leclerc. I almost felt like he said like Leclerc was more of a competition, and
Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
and like people knew that. I was like, don't think I forgot about Leclerc's 2022 season. Like that was some incredible driving, but obviously some other stuff happened.
Yeah.
We're not gonna go
Yeah.
back. We're not gonna go back
No. No.
all the way back there. But
And
like, I think that for me is at this point, I'm just like, I think Vegas is they can.
Coronation Street.
I think it can be, but I think the most that could happen is delaying the inevitable because Lando, for his shortcomings that he's had, he's been really strong in qualifying. Like that's the thing about Lando. Like he's been super strong in qualifying, and people are like, well, if he gets pole, he's gonna get past. But I'm like, yeah, but he keeps getting poles. Like that says something about who he is as a racer. Like he's really good at that one lap, and I think that's gonna help him out. Like that might keep him in the chase, but who knows?
Like literally the only thing that can save Lando, but really just delaying the inevitable, is a Max Verstappen DNS. Like
Oh, he needs it.
Lando needs to seriously outscore like Max in the sprint, right? To put that off. And then he needs to seriously outscore him and hope for a Verstappen DNF for that to go past Vegas, right?
Mhm.
But like, yeah, you're 100%. Like official. Like again, for me, it was over in Hungary, but officially, it'll be over in Vegas. Which,
Yeah.
hey, on the flip side, what I will say on the flip side, the season has been great.
Oh my gosh. Compared to
Yeah,
last
season.
season,
Yeah, compare last.
when you started the podcast last year, you're like, "Hey man, you got to listen to this." And every time I remember you started, it's like, "And once again, congratulations."
Congratulations to Max Verstappen.
Congrat-
Hey, but what? Hey, what did I always say? Like I wasn't mad. Like every sport, if you're upset about somebody winning all the time, all you got to do is
you got to do something about it.
beat them.
You got to do
Do
something
something
about
about
it.
it.
And I think
Exactly.
in this year the other teams actually did something about it.
Which is kind of a shame too. So I think next season is going to be better than this season. To be completely honest with you, for me, one of the things that I've realized in my time watching F1 is that I wish that the rules lasted a little bit longer, right? So they do this like 4-year rotation, and
Yeah.
it's just kind of like once teams start catching up, then they switch it, right? So like the era of Red Bull dominance obviously has come to an end for these sets of rules, and who knows what's going to happen in 26. Um, yeah, the sad thing is like when the season's over, we're gonna review it. We're gonna talk about all the mishaps McLaren had, right? Hungary is one, Silverstone is another one, all the
Mhm.
slow starts in China, Shanghai, like all of these things where the strategy was just kind of like papaya rules, whatever that was. And the thing is, like, here's the other thing too. Sorry that I was neglecting to say is that next year, okay, cool. Let's say the car is actually good, the McLaren is good next year. They started from scratch, so there's nothing pulling Oscar Piastri back except his own skill, right?
Yeah.
Because obviously, if Oscar opens up a big lead, sorry, Lando, the team's just gonna get behind us. So we'll see. But yeah, again, officially official.
It's
RIP Lando Norris's
yeah.
2024 World Driver Championship hopes. Like officially. On the flip side, before I go to the negative, shouts out Alpine.
Oh man.
Shouts out Alpine. Those two, I don't even know. Would you call them like? Is it friend? Are Pierre Gasly and Esteban Ocon? Is that like when Shaq and Kobe? No, I don't even know how to explain like their hatred because it really goes back like they were childhood friends, and then according to Esteban, uh, they stopped being friends because he started winning. If Pierre says it, it's the opposite. They were friends, and then Pierre started winning, and Esteban felt some type of way about that, right? Obviously, Esteban is a driver that's had to come up through the ranks. His money didn't, or his family didn't have a lot of money. He beat Max Verstappen when they were in Formula 3, but Verstappen, who had the connections, obviously got to the F1 a lot faster, had a more successful career, blah, 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 blah.
Mhm.
So I guess let me start on the positive. They were both very post race, like, we have our own personal history, our own personal beef, but I'm really happy to share this podium with Pierre. Like they both kind of said the same thing. So I guess thoughts on Alpine. Is that kind of like a good, because that was the most unexpected podium for me
Absolutely.
was Alpine.
Absolutely. And I like this. You said Shaq and Kobe. We're gonna get more specific here for you. We're gonna go 2001 Shaq and Kobe. When Kobe said Shaq came into training camp out of shape during various practices, some punches were thrown. That's where we want to be at right there. But you know what happened? They they got together and they won championship. And guess what they said? Sometimes things haven't been great, but we but together. And I'm just like, oh, you guys are sneaky. But yeah, Alpine obviously like Ocon for his start, I mean where he started on the grid, he did great in
Oh,
qualifying. Absolutely,
absolutely,
absolutely great.
absolutely.
And then Gasly, it was like literally like ideally it's a type of drive like you want one guy. Hey, we're gonna start at Ocon was P2, right?
No, Ocon. Oh
Was
yeah, he finished the race P2. Yeah, yeah.
P2. He finished the race at P2, and then
Mm-hmm.
Gasly got P3. But like Ocon though, like he was already like he made it through all the way to Q3. Gasly, he started I think 13th place.
Yeah, actually, I believe so. But he had he
Yeah.
had a pretty crazy drive
And
too,
like
right?
and that's why like and I'm just like this is literally like Alpine was just like their strategy was great. I don't care that red flag went in there and helped them out to help them because they stayed out. I don't even care because afterwards they still kept like when we had the restarts, I didn't see like besides Max passing them,
Mm-mm.
because Max passed Ocon on the restart, and after that it was just kind of just like no one else was passing them. And I thought Russell was going to pass Gasly. I mean, he was getting close, but I'm just like I never fully believed it. And I think you have to look at like their race engineers, like the racing strategy, like they played it so well. And I give
Yeah,
props to the team as a whole. Like I felt like the team came in with
absolutely,
a great strategy. They knew one driver had to make up places while another driver just had to be competitive to get to like a spot for podium. And they obviously got almost the best possible outcome. Best outcome would have been a win,
Oh,
but I think for them, they could have
that's a
asked.
win. Yeah.
That is
No, yeah, that's
absolutely
a
a
win
win.
for them. So yeah, so Gasly started at P15. So he was way down there.
Wow.
And Ocon started P4. So not as bad, but he was there to like capitalize on mistakes. It was
Yeah.
like I love the qualifying that happened this morning because it was all over the place,
Oh
right?
my
Like, yeah,
gosh.
Liam Lawson P5, which is like what the heck.
Yeah. Yuki Tsunoda
Albon,
was in P3.
yeah, Albon didn't even start the race because so Albon qualified P7,
Hmm.
but then he wrecked his car, so
Yep.
that's a little bit. Yep. And they couldn't fix the car in time, obviously. So yeah, sensational drive for me. Sensational drive from Alpine. It's been a turbulent year. Obviously, they've gone through a lot of different changes. They started the year with a car that was somehow worse than last year's car. They lost a team principal, then
Hmm.
they got a new one after the summer break. They got Bruno left, and then they had another guy come in. Man, the name they're gonna kill me on F1 for not remembering this, but this guy is actually pretty controversial. Nobody kill me, all right? Because the name is slipping, and I know they're gonna blast me. Anyways, and so they got a new TP, new organizational structure in there on top of deciding that as a works team. So instead of them being their own engine supplier, they decided that for 2026 they're going to be a customer team to Mercedes, right? So Alpine for me was like in shambles. The standings of the team obviously was not good. So this is, like you said, the best possible outcome for Alpine, because now they are sitting 3 points above Haas, with 46 points in sixth place. Like you were saying when we were talking before the start of the podcast, is like a 30 million upswing if they're able to maintain that. Now, who knows what happens with Haas over the next three races?
Oh
Obviously, Alpine needs to work to continue doing that. Like I'm cheering them on, but to me, I I didn't think Ocon was going to win the race, to be completely honest. I knew Max was probably going to do him in. The best thing that could happen to Max Verstappen was having those two Alpines behind them.
oh
And shouts out to them for being able to hold off like George and Charles and Lando and all the presumptive like challengers. I think what really burns me up, and it's going to be a segue, is that they did really well. But I cannot believe the Alpine got a double podium before Mercedes did.
man.
I
It was one of those. I have messaged you so many times. I was like, "There's a bad weekend, bad weekend." I was like, maybe I was watching some free practice. I was like, "Oh, this could be decent, a little feisty." And then sprint, I was just like, "Oh, so it's gonna be like this." And then we got to the qualifying, and I was like, "Oh, out in Q1 for Lewis." But I was like, but George, you got yourself up to P2, starting that second position. I was like, all right. But then even then, like when I watch that car, and I had to remind myself, I think you had mentioned this to me, that currently George was using the setup that was used in Silverstone, right? Is he? Or
yes.
while
Their
Lou,
setups are not the same. Yeah, yeah, because of all the crashes. Yeah,
yeah,
George is back to Silverstone. I think Lewis is back to Austin.
yeah, and it was just when that race started, like I had no hopes at all for that Mercedes car, and like I was just like, Russell, you did your thing, you led the race for part of it.
Sure.
I was like, way to go. And then I was watching Lewis, and I was like, he's just dropping back. And it was just like car after car after car. And like it wasn't just like watching on the standings. When they would show like the camera, I was like, he is sliding like every single turn. Like
Mm-hmm.
he has his wheels kept locking. Like the braking was so bad. And I'm just like, Lewis can race better than this. But I think he knows better than anyone. He's like, if he pushes the cars a little bit more, he's gonna be slamming into a wall because those brakes
A
are gonna
hundred
lock.
percent.
He
A
knew
hundred
that,
percent.
and I think that's why he couldn't go like as fast as he wanted to. And he kind of I think for him it was just like, let me get points. That's all I can do is get some
I
points and salvage it.
I don't even think he cared about the points. So like for me, obviously, like the no, here's the thing, like and I'll tell you why. Like the biggest thing that has happened to me is that like it's very obvious that like the car is not the same. Now, there's a lot of arguments online saying like he's washed. I'm not one of those people, right? Because what I have seen is when you give him a car that can actually compete, that's well balanced, that's fast, that's all of the above, he puts that mug on a podium and a
Definitely.
P1, right? Otherwise, talk to me about what happened at Spa, what happened at Silverstone where he got that win. He's got two victories on the year, right? In a car that is not good, but what I'm seeing is almost like there's been a couple races now where Lewis qualifies bad and he says to the team, "Hey, I want to start from the pit lane because I need to make changes to the setup. The setup is not great." And the team has said no,
Hmm.
right? This race, he wanted to start from the pit
Oh,
lane for this race.
I was gonna say like after that qualifying, I was like, he wants to do pit lane. Like,
Okay.
yeah,
And the previous weekend when he qualified like P19 or whatever it was that he qualified, I don't even remember what it was. Not Mexico, but like Austin, whenever he qualified P19, he again said to the team, "Hey, I want to change this car around." And they didn't. The team said, "No, because George wrecked. We need like his mechanics and your mechanics to help fix his car, right?" And then you saw on lap 3 in Austin, Lewis lost control, right? Mexico was an outlier. They finished basically swap positions. Okay,
yeah,
cool, whatever. And then during the sprint race, they didn't gain any positions. Like George finished where he started. So for Brazil, George finished where he started. Lewis finished where he started,
yeah.
right? And so you're right. If you looked at the onboard during qualifying, if you looked at the onboard during the race, you see Lewis having to manipulate that car like so much, it's sliding
Hmm.
all over the place. And you see Russell, who's having a better time at it. The car is more stable. And so, like, obviously for me, it feels very apparent that they don't have the same car. They don't have the same setup. And I don't know if this is just like Mercedes obviously is focusing on Russell and getting Russell into the points, and they're just like, Lewis, you're not really our driver anymore, and so they're just using him to do setup experiments. But the revenge tour for me next year is gonna be delicious.
Like,
Right? They're gonna put him in a car, and they're because obviously you know that Ferrari didn't bring Lewis in to have him do experiments.
yeah, they're trying to win, and I think for me it's because people are like, oh, Leclerc is gonna expose him. Lewis absolutely knows that Leclerc is a very good driver, and I think
Yeah.
like for me, I think when it comes down to it, like Lewis is just like, I want to get out there and have a car that can win races on Sunday. And I think for him, like qualifying the last few years have been rough for him, but he's shown like constantly, like if he can get to that Q3, put himself in like a decent position where he's not like starting from 10th, ninth, even in that part of qualifying, he could actually get the most out of it. And I just feel like it's just been hard to watch. But like even during this race, like I was talking to Whitney about it, and she was like she does not watch Formula One really, and she was like, this, she was like, it just looks off, something about it because you will see cars going around corners, and then you will see like show the onboard, and like everyone else is just like whoop whoop whoop, and then him, it's like that steering wheel, it's like. Is it what is it like when you're driving a car and like as soon as you accelerate you feel like the steering wheel starts shaking back and forth? I was like,
Mm-hmm.
dang, something's up. And it just seemed like Mercedes was just like, this is what it is, Lewis. Like, you got to just go out
And they
there.
don't. I just think like the biggest indicator that he's officially like I think he's been over for a while, but like for
Hmm.
me the biggest indicator that he's like officially like over and now he's publicly like I'm over this is like post race comment. He's like, yeah, we got thank God we got 3 races left. Like, and I'm paraphrasing. He's like, I can't wait for the season to be over. He's like, I don't care if I finish ahead of George, George finishes ahead of me. Like, I'm just ready for this season to be
Yeah.
done. Like, I'm over it. And so for me, release my man, break him from those shackles, right? And so for me, I again will say like I don't care if it sounds like I'm taking it away from George Russell,
Hmm.
right? Whatever. Next year, in a car that's actually good, with a team that's actually going to listen to him,
Hmm.
with the fact that Mercedes is still 3 years on, has not figured out what the ground effect era is and how to mess with that floor. Because James Allison had that team believing, like, yeah, we figured it out. I can't believe it. I can't believe it. I'm like,
Mm,
okay, show me, don't tell me. And so, like, yeah, I'm over Mercedes. I can't believe that Alpine got a double podium before they did. I mean, technically, not even technically, Mercedes had one in Spa with Russell's car had been illegal, but
yeah.
whatever. So yeah, I'm ready for at least Lewis to be freed from that. And by the way, they're not letting him out of that contract. They're literally waiting till the last possible minute to let him do any Ferrari related things, right? Because usually, like, so for example, when Fernando Alonso was moving from Alpine to Aston Martin, as soon as the season was over, they let Alonso, okay, yeah, you can go. Like, if you're gonna test cars for like Aston Martin, like go ham. So 22 going into 23, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not letting Lewis do
Uh-uh.
that. No. And I mean, obviously, from a monetary standpoint, that makes sense. I think that emotionally, like the team's reaction, Toto specifically, has not been great. I think it irks him because I think that they assumed Lewis was going to retire when he, no, I'm not going to retire. Like, I'm here for the long haul, and they didn't want to honor that. Like,
hmm
yeah,
And I think like,
I'm,
and I think for him, like it's one of those things. Like he's been very professional about it. I mean, that's all he can do at this point. He's just like trying to be
yep,
professional. And I think for him, it's just like I'm just trying to, cause I bet you there's still people at Mercedes that he really does appreciate like being around. I think for him, he just kind of sucks that he's like, this is how I'm getting shown the door. He's getting the treatment, kind of like the
I,
he's getting put down. Like that's what I feel like. Like it's no other way around it. They have something that they want to show off, and they can't wait to bust out the Russell and Kimmy duo next year.
yeah, but
And
what I've been saying too about that is that if I was George Russell, I'd also be looking for another team because the
oh,
fact that Toto is openly trying to court. Anyways, it doesn't matter. Another reason that I know like Lewis is over it was when he was driving Senna's car, which was like great. By the way, I don't know if you saw him
I
like
watched.
driving.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was really great. That was like for me, that was an amazing tribute run that he did. But the fact that he was like, yeah, it's nice to like actually drive like a real car. Like I was like,
oof. Like I heard that, I
he's
was
like,
like,
I wish I was racing that. I was like,
ugh.
but Lewis's situation, you and I obviously grew up watching The Fresh Prince of Bel Air. You
Mhm.
already know where I'm gonna go. For me, Lewis's situation is when Will's dad came in. You remember that episode?
Yep.
And when Lou just kind of like ditched him, and Will's like broken up about it,
He's
he gets
like,
real angry with Uncle Phil. It's like, how come they don't love me?
how come
Like,
he
how
don't
come they
want me,
don't love
man?
me?
How come he don't want me, man? And like that's what I think. Like if anything, like when Lewis saw that he's like, I want, be an ambassador, do all this stuff, and they're like, no, I think it's time that you call it quits, Lewis. It's time you. He kind of was just like, oh, all right. After all I've done for this team, pretty much like won, I believe it's 5 championships with Mercedes, right? That's what he won.
Six,
Six,
six.
six. Oh yeah, because there was one with McLaren, and he did all that, and it was just like, yeah, don't let the door hit you on the way out, type of thing. And like, I think that's why. And like this, and it's not even. I don't even feel like there's been much celebration of his time there. This,
Uh, no, that McLaren has celebrated Lewis Hamilton's accomplishments more than the team has, and the team only has because they got bullied by the fans. Like
yeah,
the fans, I know the Mercedes admin is like, oh, can't wait till he's gone because I'm tired of these people in our mentions and cussing us out. It's bad when they're blasting Mercedes on the LinkedIn page. Which, first of all, like if you're a professional and you're on a LinkedIn page leaving comments, I'm like, bro, are you not employed? Don't you have
yeah.
a job? And so yeah, again, like for me, I think it's very painful for Lewis. I think it's been a year-long grieving process for him. I think it's very much been like he gave all of this for the team. He's been doing all of this for the team, and yeah, again, Will Smith with his dad. How come you don't want me, man?
Mm.
And so, but the race is over. On to Vegas, 3 weeks. Which, by the way, obviously you and I are both in the states.
Ugh.
Those start times for the Vegas race so dumb
It
for me.
it makes
So
no sense.
so dumb.
You know,
Like
you know what I was reminiscent. You know what I looked at. I had to go back just because I was sad about where we're at with that Vegas start time. 2002, when they had the race in the Indianapolis in Indianapolis over
yeah,
here,
shouts out Indy 500
and
or Indy
I was just
IMS.
like man, I wish we had that. If we had that, that would have been great. But we got Vegas in 3 weeks, right? That's what you
Yeah,
said.
3 weeks. Yeah. By the way, F1, if you're listening, bring that race back to Indianapolis.
Do it.
I'm going to that race. I won't even have to pay hotels.
I I
I'm
would
there.
I would
I'm
go to
there.
that right
I'm
instantly.
there.
I am
I'm
I
there.
am there.
So, all right. Hey, we have finally come to the end of the show. And it's customary every time I have a guest on. Um, I always ask them who their pariguayos and their matatans are. The great thing about having Elkyn on is that I don't have to explain to him what a pariguayo and a matatan is. Yes, that's right. Another Dominican on the show. So, uh, for this race, Elgin, who is your pariguayo or worst performers of this race?
I'm gonna say like Paraguayo. McLaren's just overall, especially Lando's one of them. But you know who my Paraguayo is, man? Cause this person got the black flag.
Oh,
Yeah, Hulkenberg. I am just like, I was like, hold up. Like, I instantly like messaged Emmy. I was like, he knew he couldn't do that, right? Like,
Absolutely.
it was
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
it was literally straight out Dave Chappelle skit. I'm sorry, officer. I didn't know I couldn't do that.
I
Type.
didn't know.
Like, like that's how I felt. Like I was just oh
Oh man,
you
yeah.
see him like getting pushed. I was just like, my guy, we're in the year 2024 of our Lord. There are hundreds of cameras. Everyone's gonna see you get pushed, and you've been in the game for a while. I'm just like, you know better. Like for me, he's worse than Lando. At least like Lando.
That's so funny.
Like for me, that's why like he's who I'm picking. And outside of that, I'm just gonna keep it at those. Who do you got though?
Yeah. So for me, I'm gonna go left field with this. My bodyguard of the race is Lance Stroll. Honestly, the it's got to be. I'm like, every time I see Lance, I'm like, bro, what you got to be sad about? Your
Yeah,
dad loved you so much, he bought you a team.
man,
You don't got to do anything except just show up. And for me, the rage quit on the formation lap,
he was
like
done.
just oh, like come on, Lance. So yeah, bodyguard for me is Lance Stroll alias Lance Sulk, the Incredible Sulk. Yeah. Okay. So for you, Matatan of the race, who is your best performer?
Uh, I'm gonna have to give it up to one Max space a million space for stopping. Gotta make sure to Acto
100%.
space Maximilian is not together. Thank you. I wonder whose idea that was. I gotta ask.
Uh,
I gotta figure out one of
yeah,
these days.
I don't even know.
But I mean, I don't think you can come away in that race and saying he wasn't the marathon of the race, just with the race
Absolutely.
that he had. And like honestly, if it wasn't him, I would have given it to. It's Alpine for me. It's Alpine the team.
Oh yeah,
Absolutely. Though
yeah.
they crushed this weekend after their season has been tumultuous. I think they have not had a higher finish than eighth. Like I don't think any of their drivers have gotten higher than eighth this entire season. And for them to come out like that, because here's the thing, they could have just like started off whatever they started and just drifted off and just drifted back.
Hmm.
But no, those guys had a great drive, and those are my two right there. Who do you got though?
Yeah. So I agree, but honestly, for me, Soul Matatan is Max Verstappen, who had to remind people once again
Oh,
who he was. Sensational, generational drive. Put a stamp on it, and yeah, coronation in Vegas on American soil coming up. Um, but yeah, that is it. Thank you so
for
much. For
sure.
those who are watching, please don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, tell your tios, your tias, abuelos, abuelas, vecinos, whoever. For the Monoplaza F1 podcast, I'm Emi Beltre. This was Elkyn. Peace.